Hello. We're back. Another Sunday, another episode of whatever number we're on. It's been too many. It's been more than your username.
Yeah, it's been what is this, 107, 108?
I don't even know anymore. But we're back. We're in the 100th, so we have to have 100th coin. See, it makes sense. Also,
Calculated.
calculated. Also, thank you for providing the artwork for this stream.
Yeah,
it's
of course,
it's
of course.
quite perfect, I think. So, anyway, so you are here now. So who are you? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, hello, I'm 100th Coin. I'm primarily a tool-assisted speedrunner, although I make some very non-traditional tasks. I'm also a game developer. That's pretty much it.
That's all you've got.
Yeah. I have done some teeny amount of RTA speedrunning, but not too much. It's mostly been tool-assisted.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think I've had someone that's primary focus was tool assisted yet, but it is still speedrunning, so it still counts.
Yeah.
So this will be interesting because when it comes to the world of tassing, I'm kind of dumb. That's why I do the RTA. I have the people figure out what buttons I have to push, and then I push the buttons. When it comes
Right.
to building the everything, no, too
Well, I
too
mean,
complicated.
when it comes to tasking, I don't know if I'm like the best example of a tasser because the things that I do are very untraditional. The tasks that I've done are usually just beating games from the title screen by pressing buttons at thousands of times a second,
Hmm.
as opposed to actual routing and optimization.
Yeah, but I still don't understand it, so
Right. I
it's
can
all the
try and
same.
explain it,
It's
and
all the same.
yeah.
That's why you're here to explain it for dumb people such as myself.
All
So,
right.
well,
So should I get started with my introduction to speedrunning, just how I discovered it all?
yes, please.
All right. So long before I actually knew what speedrunning was, I had a PlayStation 2, but I didn't have a PlayStation 2 memory card.
Mm.
So in order to actually make progress in my favorite game, Crash Twin Sanity, I just needed to, play faster to actually experience the new parts of the game. And this probably would have been when I was like 7 or 8 years old, and my parents only limited me to like 2 or 3 hours of TV time a day. So I was just rushing to actually experience more of the game until one Christmas I got a memory card and then, could play at a leisurely pace. But it wasn't until AGDQ 2013 when I think my brother was showing me Trihex's speedrun of Yoshi's Island, which was one of the few games I actually had on my Game Boy. So watching Trihex absolutely destroy that game was just breathtaking. Because like you'd watch him ricochet an egg off like three things and hit a target once, and your mind was blown, and it happens hundreds of times throughout the entire run. And then immediately after that was Carl Sagan showed off a glitch showcase of Yoshi's Island, and that was also just even more mind blowing. And it was immediately after seeing that it's like, oh, I want to know how to do that. I want to be a part of this. So I started speedrunning Mario 3. I didn't actually record any of those runs. It was mostly just me, my TV, and a timer on my phone, and I would write down like my times. I definitely wasn't super good. Specifically with Mario 3, I think my no wrong warp time was around like 14 something. But it was mostly the hand levels that ruined everything. So I stopped running that category. And then as soon as I saw Mitch Flowerpower do the wrong warp at Games Done Quick, it's like, wow, I want to know how to do that. And then I started running that. I think I got around a time of like 3 minutes and 30 seconds, which was, pretty decent. I think that would have been around like top 10 at the time.
Yeah, that's
And
pretty
I
good.
was yeah, yeah. And I was really aiming for like less than 3:10. And I think one time I almost had it. It would have been like 3 minutes and 8 seconds, except the game crashed, so it didn't count.
Mm.
And with the amount of times that like I failed doing the pipe glitch in Mario 3, which is I even like when tasking it, it's frustrating to do. Um, I decided, all right, I'm done. I'm going to find a better way to run arbitrary code in this game. And I haven't actually done that, but that is absolutely how I got started with like tasking. Because at that point, it's no longer RTA. I don't have to actually do the pipe glitch first try. I can just TAS it until I get it right, and then learn more about how assembly code works and how to exploit the game to make it run whatever code I want.
So
So
you never recorded any RTA?
I recorded some of them back in like 2017. I
Okay.
don't think I still have the recordings though.
I was gonna say
Most of
because
it.
it sounds like you would have been pretty high in the leaderboard then, but like that just lost to time then.
Not for the no wrong warp category. I probably would have been like 40th or 50th.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the wrong warp category.
Right, for the wrong warp, I probably would have been top 10. I don't think I recorded, I don't think I submitted any of those at least.
That's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah. I did have a capture card, and my only computer at the time was a very slow laptop, so actually recording it would have just been not great.
Mm. Well, there's always the tried and true record it on your phone method. You know, it works
Ah,
for
you're
some
right, you know?
people.
I guess I could have done that, yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
so when it actually came to like tool assisted speedruns, my initial objective was to just find another way to run arbitrary code in Mario 3. And I initially started with like zero knowledge. I didn't really know how the CPU of the NES worked at the time. It was just I knew how the wrong warp worked because I watched the Retro Game Mechanics explained video about it. Um, and yeah, I just fiddled around a whole bunch. Started to learn assembly through. There's a very well-made disassembly of the game with like a comment on nearly every line of the code explaining what's going on. And like through making modifications to the ROM, that's kind of how I started to learn assembly.
hmm,
And then of course there was the wonderful task by Master June that completes the game in like 2 seconds. That was showcased at Games Done Quick, and then a few years later submitted to task videos. And I wanted to know how that worked, which there's this kind of a pattern of like I saw something cool, it's like I want to know how to do that, and then I spent a lot of time figuring out how to do that. But with the task by Master June, specifically there was a some update to the BizHawk emulator, and that task no longer worked in BizHawk. I don't know the full story of why, but I wanted to try and make a version of the task that would work, which eventually led to me optimizing it and submitting that to task videos. And then I immediately after that got published, I did it again like a week later, and that was the first time I submitted to task videos. It was very surprising how accepting people were, because with the Master June task, there was a lot of criticism in like the comments. But like with my task, everyone's like, "Wow, I didn't even know this category could be beaten faster."
hmm, weird.
And then yeah, I think I got Rookie Tasser of 2021, which was quite a surprise because I really only submitted those two tasks in 2021.
Hmm.
And then most recently, I submitted a single task on April Fool's Day last year, which ended up winning me like 4 awards, which is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I don't know how test videos does awards. I'm not too into the scene. I stick to the RTA side of things, but I know it's like a whole different community with whole different everything, whole different world.
Right. The awards is pretty much it's just like a forum post with a poll.
Mm.
And then like initially there's you just suggest it's like, yeah, this run I think is good enough for being in this category. Like, yeah, this was a really good NES task. This was a really good glitchy task. And then if it gets like enough nominations, then it gets added to a poll that I think goes on for a week or two.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I guess that makes the most sense to do it.
Yeah,
So
pretty straightforward.
yeah, there's no like video like whoa look at this. It's just all done in the forums.
Yeah. It
Very
would be
nice.
really cool though to have some sort of awards ceremony and like do little miniature interviews with the taskers. That'd be really cool.
Mm. See, this is content ideas live.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Someone can take that and run with it. Yeah, there's a lot of like little award shows for different like RTA communities, and I always love watching them because yeah, it's just a celebration of the past year of accomplishments in said community. So
Hmm.
tassing again is a very big whole other community. They could probably get away with it.
Right.
All right, someone out there can do it though, not me.
Hmm.
I don't know, but all right. So were these tasks that were getting the awards like the you know point like the less than a second thing.
Yeah, so the one where I beat Mario 3 in like 0.2 seconds, that one got glitchy TAS of 2021, and I think that was the same year I got Rookie TASer of the Year. And then the one that I submitted in April Fool's Day last year was the one where I played the Bad Apple music video
Hmm.
entirely through button presses. And there was a lot of other reasons why it was as interesting as it was, because it required swapping cartridges in the middle of the task. Because you initially play like a quarter second task of Mario 3, where you just manipulate the memory, and then you swap to Mario 1, so you can start the game in World N, and it has a payload written in RAM.
Hmm.
But yeah, that was the only task I submitted last year, which got glitchy task of the year, Nest task of the year. There was a three-way tie between Nest task of the year, which is fantastic. I love seeing all the other people also get the award. It was great. And
Really?
then there was I somehow won Nest Tasser, which I don't know if that was justified. Like
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure there was someone out there who submitted like 10 Nest Tasses, and I only submitted one, so I feel like I kind of robbed them from that one. Um, but then the TAS also just won TAS of 2024, which is pretty crazy.
So, when you were submitting the first ones, when you get rookie tester, that means like that was the first year you started submitting, I assume. That's
Yes,
how they do
yes.
that.
They
So,
have like the Tasser of the year, and then the rookie Tasser is the equivalent, but for the first year that you've submitted.
so you really haven't been at least submitting that long, then.
Correct. Yeah,
Interesting.
I started submitting in 2021, and then I pretty much didn't submit for 2 years, and then I submitted again. Well, actually, okay, so not the April Fools of 2024, but for April Fool's Day of 2023, that was when I initially submitted like the Super Mario Brothers arbitrary code execution, where you just or you're in World N, and then killing Bowser in World N allows for running arbitrary code.
Hmm.
And we figured out that it actually wouldn't sync on console because the BizHawk emulator at the time was incorrectly emulating OpenBus. So I got to actually modify the BizHawk emulator to make it do that correctly.
Hmm. So I'm just curious, like you had the era of doing a little bit of RTA and then transition to tasking, but it sounds like there was like a big time gap in there.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time just glitch hunting
Mm.
because the original goal was to try and find a way to run arbitrary code without the pipe glitch in Mario 3 because I was so very spiteful that that one glitch is what ended so many of my runs, and then eventually that one time I actually got it first try and then the game crashed. That was just that ruined me. So
Fair.
I spent a lot of time just glitch hunting, and like my early YouTube channel videos is just a lot of glitch documentation. It's like, hey, look, you can do this, and most of them was also using the pipe glitch to set up things in RAM so you could run arbitrary code with some other wacky exploit. But it was primarily just glitch hunting for a long time before I actually started submitting to task videos. And even the tasks that aren't beating the game from like the title screen, they aren't the most optimal, and I recognize that. I didn't put too much emphasis on actually optimizing the game with my glitch hunting. And then I think the actual first time I had to optimize a run that I submitted was the Mario 1 gameplay before playing the Bad Apple music video. I did all the inputs for that. It was loosely based off of a task that someone made before me, but I had to figure out how to do the flagpole glitch, which I have no idea how RTA runners do that consistently. I was barely able to do that with a task.
Well, in all fairness, it's all like subpixel manipulation, so there's like a very
Right.
small string of frame perfects. If you just do it, it works.
If you do it, it works. That makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when you're just running through and like, turning around and doing all random, the subpixels are just what wherever they are. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all a
I
mess.
think I was following some video guide on how to do the flagpole glitch, and eventually I just downloaded the current task of Super Mario Brothers, copied some inputs, lined up the subpixels, and it worked. It's like, oh, all right, very cool.
Mm, interesting. Now this test, the first level is technically just 8-3, right?
Yes, yes. World N dash one is just 8-3.
You
I
don't you don't
actually
even have
needed
to
to.
FPG.
Right, it technically didn't save any time.
Mm-hmm.
It
Because
was
you,
just for style points.
yeah, you can't get the, or only a task can get the 244 timer. Otherwise, you have to FIPO glitch to match that frame rule.
Right,
It's
specifically
it's a
for
very
this
weird,
one,
it's a very
I
weird
needed to get
situation.
the fire flower because I need to kill Bowser with fireballs in World N in
Ah,
order to
yeah,
trigger
okay.
the Ace exploit. So I did have to circle back a little bit collecting the mushrooms and the fire
That's
flower.
right. Okay. I did forget about that. But yeah, A3 is just such an interesting level where the task and the RTA get the same frame rule, but in completely different ways because the
Hmm.
task can get the in-game timer to not count down for the fireworks. But to do that, it can't do FlyPo glitch because then it'd be too slow. I don't
Right.
know. It's such an interesting situation.
I think what's even more fascinating is N-2, which is 8-4, except you don't enter any of the pipes and the level doesn't loop.
Yeah, they don't have the loop trigger. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
funny. Like you don't realize it's all just one big room. They just set up the positions where oh reset,
Hmm.
but it's all just one continuous area. Seth Bling actually showcased that on the All Stars version during his run at
Oh.
SGQ 2022. Someone found out where if you line up a certain X coordinate, I think, or no Y, and there's no clip in the like Ace whatever
Hmm.
is going on, but
Yeah,
if
you
you
get
line
like
it
some
up
debug
perfectly,
mode.
the loop function doesn't like activate, so you just run through it just like you would there.
Very cool.
Yeah. All this stuff is, yes, very fascinating, and my brain can't comprehend it all, but I just see cool
Mhm.
thing and I'm like, whoa, clap.
Yeah,
So
and I think what's extra hard to understand with like the tasks that beat the game from the title screen is like when I'm talking to like a route where it's like I'm trying to execute some specific bytes, and like when I look at like how Master Gene pulled that off with their task compared to what I'm doing, it's entirely different, and it is kind of like a route, but it's very much not in the same way that a route would be for like Mario 64, where you move Mario over here to collect this thing and then go over here. Where with this, it's just I'm pushing different buttons to execute different code.
yes, it's all Ace. It's all
Yeah,
Ace.
yeah, it's all GTA's.
Yeah, well, not quite, but almost. Um, yeah, again, that whole everything going on there just too complicated for me. You see, I'm a computer science failure, so that sounds more harsh than it is. But so yeah, I just try to watch the videos and try to understand to the best of my ability. I just see numbers appear and information appear, and I'm like, oh okay, sure.
Right, and when it comes to making the videos that I do, I really hope other people can follow along. It's really hard, and this also ties in with like game development. It's hard to know what you don't know. When like you spend all this time doing the research and then making the script, it's very easy to assume that everyone just knows that this already works and like how it works. It's hard to figure out what do I actually need to explain.
hmm Yeah, I feel like that's a common thing with big tech explanation, even like general like I discovered speedrunning through the whole world record progressions and everything, but you still have to explain things that make sense even when you're just telling a story of a world record thing. And then when you get to like task level, that's so much more complicated in terms of
Mhm.
like being able to understand what's going on. So, you definitely need to like send it to someone and be like, "Does this make sense?" And it's someone
I
that,
did that a lot.
yeah, I assume so. You just have to because when you get to such a level of understanding, you don't know what dumb people such as myself would they would interpret it. So,
He definitely ended up in a lot of situations where like you spend a week making this one visual for the video, and then someone looks at it like, I don't get this at all, and it's like, no. It's like, well, can I keep the visual and try explaining it better, or do I actually need to redo this?
shows it, and I don't know what that means.
I don't know
That's a
what that means.
reference. Anyway, so yeah,
Uh,
TASs, very cool.
right. I know I'm not like the best example of a tasser because what I do is very weird, but like what kind of knowledge should I be explaining to the
Hmm.
audience here?
I'm curious because I don't really even know. Like, I watch the videos and those are the like best chance to have something explained, right? Because
Yeah.
you're able to get the visuals and again, you can send it off before anything's finished to be like, "Hey, does this make sense?" And so the final product is most likely like the average person can sit down and at least follow along for the most part. But that's like the best thing I can do is just like, "Hey, watch the videos."
Yeah.
It's impossible to explain it on the fly. Tassing's just a very complicated thing,
Hmm.
and programming and all that is its own very complicated thing that you basically just have to have a background to fully grasp what is
Right. And,
what is
and and the kind
happening.
of exploits that I'm doing are so divorced from even regular tasking. They're like I'm just writing programs to find ways to execute this code. I'm barely even pushing the inputs myself. I'm just generating them.
Yeah, it's weird. Like tassing in its basic form, I guess, can be explained pretty easily. It's just, oh, you have the game here. Let's write down all the inputs and have something play them back, like a player
It's like a
piano
poor
or something,
piano.
right?
Yeah.
Like you're still like a player piano. You make the music, but then you have something play it back for you. It's the same thing. It's just here are the inputs, play them back for me. Like in its basic form, it's not too complicated, but then the stuff you're doing with those inputs gets exponentially more complicated the faster you go.
Right,
It
right.
feels.
Oh, actually, similar analogy. Have you seen the one video where they set up the player piano in such a way that it almost sounds like it's speaking in English?
Yes, yeah.
I feel like that's kind of what I'm doing with the tasks. Like I'm pressing
Interesting.
buttons in such a weird way that I'm not actually playing the game. I'm doing an entirely unrelated task.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that those videos are freaky. Like
Yeah.
where you can well, I guess your brain is kind of like putting in the pieces of the puzzle because it's something you've heard before and it's kind of recall. I don't know. I'm getting off topic. The brain's its own complicated mess, but yeah, it does kind of sound like human speech, human singing, and it's just a bunch of notes being played at the same time. That's really all.
That's at least the best analogy I can come up with. Because, like,
I think
yeah,
it's a
how
good
do you
analogy.
explain
Yeah.
pressing buttons at 8 kilohertz? Like,
Yeah, I think that's the best interpretation that can be really said. Like it's just you have the basic explanation, but then you can do this with that, and it's like, oh, okay, sure.
hmm.
So yeah, definitely, yeah. I like the analogy. Is what I'm basically saying. I
Yeah.
think that's the best way it's can be comprehended.
I think I'm pretty good at coming up with analogies. I try to use them as much as possible in my videos because I
I have
really do think it
noticed.
helps.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah, those are the best way because the best way to like recall information is to link it to something you're already familiar with, so you can like understand it in a way that makes sense to you. So
Hmm.
yes, I think that's the best way to go about it, and it works. People seem to understand what the hell you're talking about. So
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
most part,
For the most part. I get occasional comments. It's like, I didn't follow along. And it's like, no, I failed.
no, one person out of
Yeah.
hundreds.
Right,
I'm a
right.
failure. That I mean, that's the whole rabbit hole of content anyway. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's always that one like but or not negative I guess in that case, but just the whole like I didn't get it. It's like, well,
Maybe it wasn't for you.
epic fail, even though like a lot of other people were okay with it.
Yeah, you send it to people in the community and they're like, this is amazing. And then you send it to someone else who just stumbles upon it, like, I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm in that fun middle ground where I'm like, I should be able to understand it for the most part, but it's still like, sure,
Yeah.
sure, that works, makes sense.
It's also like it's pretty difficult to try explaining how assembly code works in a YouTube video that's not entirely just assembly. Like there's another goal to the video. It's just this knowledge is kind of required.
Yeah, it's interesting because what programming languages are so more advanced now where like no one even thinks about assembly anymore. So you have to like even people that are knowledgeable about computer programming, it's like, well, this is how it used to be done. You probably don't quite understand it either.
And to tie back into programming and other content creators, I know when they're doing like showcasing like the world record progression, they always got to be like, okay, well, we have to explain what this glitch is and how it works.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's kind of what I'm doing in my video, except it's on a scale of I have to explain how assembly works because this video is mostly assembly.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way around it.
Right.
Like that's the bulk of the how things work.
Like either I assume people are going into the video with assembly knowledge or they just won't get it.
Yeah, and then there's the whole balance of a good middle ground where people that know exactly what's happening aren't bored and people that don't understand what's happening aren't bored.
Yeah, that's why I fill my videos with as many footnotes as possible. Because like, I mean, I could stop. Like I said, the word NMI. Oh dear, I could explain for 5 minutes what the non-maskable interrupt is, or I could just put it on a footnote on screen.
Yeah, those who truly care can then understand. But yeah, I'm not one of those people. So I'm speaking from the sense of somewhere in the middle ground. So, but I think I can get through it.
Yeah.
I've obviously watched the videos. I
Hmm.
I I I, w- I can't say I'm a master. Like I can't repeat back everything and be like, yeah, that's what happened. But that's more me.
Right. I
And
also think it's handy, like, if people are actually trying to learn how this stuff works, they could watch the video and slow things down and read all the footnotes.
mhm. Yeah, I think the middle ground was achieved. That I think that's the point I'm trying to make.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
But it is like a very hard thing to do. And
Hmm.
when you get into the YouTube content side of things, it's something you have to try to figure out where it is. And
Right. Or how to
everyone's
start a.
audience is different and like there's so much
Yeah.
that go behind the scenes of like the content side of things. Like you can just upload this to test videos and people kind of get it, or for the most part, because test videos people are like knowledgeable about this kind of stuff.
Right,
But when
right.
you bring it out into
Put on
more
YouTube, you
yeah,
really have to explain it to a general audience.
yeah, and it's just something I think can be shared, like a similar sentiment can be shared against all, between all like speedrun content creators, especially
Hmm.
when they get into more of like the deep dives of how things work.
Right,
Every audience, every topic has to have some sort of middle ground where everyone can digest the information in their own way.
right. And to tie it into like Mario 1 speedrunning with like the flagpole glitch, you know how difficult the flagpole glitch is, or if you're just getting
Yeah,
started at speedrunning, you know how hard it is to like, how much of an achievement it is to pull off your very first flagpole glitch. But for people who have no idea what's going on and they're just watching for the first time, like, oh yeah, okay. Frame
sure.
roll, what's a bus?
We're back. You see, that's the thing I always come across is if I'm like doing commentary for like a Mario 1 run, I'm always like, frame rules, we know what that is by now. But there are people watching, they're probably like, no.
Right, yeah.
And and you always forget it because you're just so used to it. And man,
That's the kind of point where in my video I just put a footnote on screen. It's like, here's what a frame rule is.
yes, boss, haha, funny. Anyway, um,
Yeah,
but yeah, I get the whole point I'm trying to make here is content creation hard.
it really, it really
There's
is. I mean,
so much that just
this video
like
specifically did
oh
not
yeah.
have much video. Like, there was very little footage to put in the background of this. It was primarily text and images that I drew for 40 minutes.
Yeah, but yeah, again, the point I'm saying here is just the there's so much to go behind the scenes, not just in the creation of what you're doing, but like the content based on the thing.
Hmm.
There's so much work, and it's hard to be appreciative of everything that goes into it, and
Hmm.
because it's so hard. Like almost creating content is as hard as what you're making the content on.
Right, yeah.
Which is funny from like maybe your side of things, where the thing you're making the content on is incredibly complex already,
Yeah.
and then you have to make
It was
content on it.
it was pretty crazy because like I actually made those runs back in like August, and then it was pretty much the bulk of the rest of the year and then into March actually trying to explain what it is.
Yeah, like again, you said what it took 7 to 8 months or something of just
Yeah.
video, let alone the years of work to get to the point of whatever the hell you're doing anymore.
Right.
Ugh, it's interesting. Well, anyway, I guess I should try to dive in more onto the. I kind of got sidetracked on everything, but like the tasks specifically, you technically
Mhm.
haven't done a lot of them,
Right.
but they have just been like something no one else has really done before, at least to the level it's at,
Mhm. And
which
some people
is.
actually have started making more like subframe tasks.
Hmm.
I know what I've done is definitely not like the last of what's happened.
Oh
There's
no, I'm
been,
just saying more the first of what's happened.
and I
The
mean, I
door
don't even
has
want to
been
do that
opened.
because Master June did it before me.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think I at least contributed in making it a bit more popular. Um, I
Yeah.
hope. And
I think
there's
the YouTube
been
numbers don't lie. So.
YouTube numbers don't lie. You're right. But yeah, it's always exciting every time someone makes another a subframe task and uploads it to task videos. I usually reply, and I love reading through the author comments on how they do it and what the code is that they exploit and just how it works.
Hmm. So to get back to like the first tasks, these were
Mhm.
like these were subframe, right?
The first ones I submitted were yes.
Yes. Okay. So I guess just kind of in its basic form, what does that mean?
So the BizHawk emulator that I used to make this in has a core, which I guess is kind of like a setting, so
Hmm.
such that you can have multiple inputs in a single frame, as opposed to typically you just have one set of button presses per frame. That's how most tasks work. But the way that this task works is every time you press, or every time the console reads the controller, which doesn't necessarily happen once per frame, every time that happens it allows you to choose a different set of buttons. And specifically, the way this works in Mario 3 is due to a hardware level bug called the DPCM audio bug. It's some way that by playing specific audio samples, it's possible that the data on the controller gets corrupt because it's trying to simultaneously read from the controller and then stop what it's doing to prepare the next audio sample, which ends up accidentally communicating with the controller is like, hey, give me the next input. But that's not actually what's going on. It's just trying to do a stall while it waits for the audio chip to be ready, and that can end up corrupting the data on the controllers. So the developers of Mario 3 specifically needed to write some programming solution such that they can still play these audio samples, but the controller data will not get corrupt. And their solution is basically just read the controller multiple times, and if you get the exact same number twice in a row, then it wasn't corrupted. And you can take advantage of that in the subframe task because every time the controller is read, you can just give it a different input. So you can just make it loop infinitely. And what actually happens before the controllers get read is basically the chip inside the cartridge schedules something. So it's like, hey, after this many scan lines have been drawn, stop what you're doing. We need to run this code at this exact moment every time. So the checkerboard floor stays in the same place, but the curtains can rise on like a different layer. But there's really only one background layer, so they have to time the scan line at a specific moment to change where they're drawing from. It's really clever. It's really cool. But what happens if you're still reading the controller when that happens is it jumps to code that isn't even loaded because it just assumes, hey, if we're on the title screen, this code will be loaded. Except we're in the middle of the controller reading code, so that code is definitely not loaded.
Mm.
And then you just begin executing code from RAM, which is also there's some locations where the game will store whatever inputs you most recently pressed on the controller, and that's what ends up getting executed as code.
Which
But
becomes arbitrary code execution.
exactly, and then you can do
Hmm.
that to make a jump to the credits.
Indeed. So it's interesting because everyone's so used to the original, as we were mentioning earlier, like the 7.1 You
Hmm.
put the enemies on the certain coordinates, and then you execute the jump in that level. But you're just doing this within. And the other thing that's interesting about tasking and like how these actually work is there's so much going on so quickly that like isn't
Yeah,
visually apparent or anything. Like co- code runs fast,
yeah.
really fast.
And yeah, I think like from the first moment the controller gets red, we're already manipulating it by sending it alternating inputs so that we can immediately jump to RAM to execute our own custom code.
Like all of this stuff that's happening is what the final task is what like 0.2 seconds or something
Yeah, it's
from,
like
and that's power
0.215
on,
or
right? So you
something.
hit
Yeah,
power.
from power on. Yeah.
0.2 seconds later, there's no more inputs happening and the game is done.
It's pretty crazy, yeah. And that was the first well the first one I submitted was actually zero point 0.3 seconds.
Hmm.
But the one after that was zero point 0.2.
Yeah, huge improvement.
Uh,
But like actually,
unironically.
unironic,
I
ironically
mean,
and unironically.
yeah, I think like a week after the first one was published, I saved like 6 more frames from an already incredibly short, like, I think it was 19 frames and then it was 13 frames,
Incredible. And again,
which is
even that amount of time, like the human eye can't process it yet fully.
exactly right.
Just fascinating stuff. So, the first one of these tasks was someone else, and I think I remember like the screen is like full of what should be the curtains, but it's like red clouds, and then all of a sudden get
Yeah,
like
yeah.
displayed.
And that's specifically because when the game is trying to update the screen position so the checkerboard floor can be in one place, it's running the wrong function. But in for instance, if you're just in a level and the screen is scrolling, the HUD is always at the bottom of the screen, and it's also using an entirely different set of graphics. It needs to swap out a character bank so that it can go from the regular tiles to the numbers and stuff. And that's basically what's happening on the title screen there is instead of the curtains, it's being incorrectly swapped out for an entirely unrelated set of graphics,
Hmm.
which I think is also still the HUD, which when you're on like the map, you can flip it over and it has like your items, and one of which is a cloud. And
Hmm.
I guess the icon for the cloud is in the same location as the icon for the curtains in a different graphics bank. So
Hmm.
when they get swapped out, the curtains just become clouds.
Well, there's some information that you don't hear about
Right. Yeah.
elsewhere, so that kind of makes sense to me at least.
I hope it
To
does.
to
If you
the
need.
to the general, as like being an explanation as general as possible, it makes sense.
Ooh.
Yeah, just like, oh, like different graphics can be loaded, but they have like the same area, so it's just like same area but different graphics thing,
Yeah.
and so that's why that is. There you go.
And then
The
you
more you
and then you
know.
get clouds.
Then you get red clouds instead of curtains,
Yeah.
and then the game finishes. Don't worry about it.
Right. Yeah.
How long was that first one?
I think it was like 0.318 seconds.
Not yours, like the.
Oh, the one by Master June. I think that was like 0. It was like 7 something, or maybe it was.
But
I
it
think it
was
was like
still less than a
0.78.
second. Okay,
It was still less than a second. It was like 0.78.
got it.
And the one before
Fascinating.
that was showcased at Games Done Quick. I believe the actual run would have tied my current task, except it would have had issues on there would have been graphical issues and the game would have crashed during the credits,
Mm.
which I think it actually did at the demonstration. Except they also just waited like 2 seconds so that the game would actually be visible on screen before it jumps to the credits of the GDQ showcase.
Ah, okay. I see. Yeah, some things must be sacrificed in the name of entertainment.
Hmm.
Although you don't really follow that metric,
No.
as I've heard.
My most recent one, the actually nothing can be drawn on screen before that one's done.
Yeah, and we'll dive into that a little more. I'm just trying to stick to the timeline here.
Right.
But yeah, I think trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to know more about that one, but I mean, obviously you have a whole video on it that explains like more in detail on how it actually works. So
Right.
people who want the full digestion of information can just watch that because, it's its own unique way of doing it compared to anything else that might happen later.
It's a very
Hint, hint.
different way of playing video games than most people would.
I think so. I don't think most people can hit multiple different inputs on like hundreds of inputs on one frame of time. Like I don't think
Right, on two different controllers.
yeah, that's a little fast, I think, for the human to do. But, technically a computer can do it if you tell it to. So there you go.
Yeah,
The more you
we've
know.
definitely had replay devices do that on actual hardware.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about like the task bot and everything. Console verification, I guess. That's
Yeah.
the word we use to make sure like the tasks can actually be played back in original hardware if they have the inputs. So because it's reading the controller data all the same, like it can just be done on original hardware, no question, which is
And
very,
I know
very
I'm
fascinating.
jumping ahead in the timeline here a little bit, but it was genuinely so exciting when I uploaded the Bad Apple one, and I think Alyosha was actually able to play it on hardware,
Hmm.
which was so amazing. Because like before I actually submitted it, me and Dwango AC and I think Big Bass in the Task Videos Discord, we were trying to console verify it. We did not succeed.
Mm.
Um,
Do you know why?
yeah, I honestly don't. I'm
Oh.
not sure exactly how Alyosha made it work consistently. I'm not super familiar with how replay devices work and how making it run on hardware works.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it's cool that it's got to work because again, like the console is actually reading those button inputs even if they can't be at all
Yeah.
humanly done. So the game can just technically do that. That's
Hmm.
which I know gets a little more complicated in later stuff. Again, foreshadowing, but I guess so this opened the door for like super fast arbitrary code execution. At least for Mario 3. Obviously, this kind of exploit I assume doesn't work with most games.
Not every game, but there is a surprising amount of games that it does work for.
Okay. Is there like a reason why, or is it just?
Um, it's kind of the same reason why it does work for Mario 3. If you're using the DPCM audio samples and you want to make sure your game doesn't incorrectly corrupt the data on the controller, there's a pretty common method where you just read the inputs multiple times in a frame, and a
Mhm.
lot of games do that. But
Okay.
also, the specifics of why it works on Mario 3 does not apply to every game. For instance, when it does work on Mario 3, it's because it schedules that one function to run, and then it swaps the code out, and then it's just incorrectly assumes the correct code will be there when the function does happen. So for a game like The Legend of Zelda, which I was still able to exploit through pressing buttons insanely fast, the way that one works is entirely different, but it is still through the power of pressing buttons insanely fast.
I see. Now, is Mario 1 an example of one that can't do that?
Correct. Mario 1 does not use the DPCM audio samples, it only reads the controller once per frame.
Okay. Because that explains why for what we'll now get into, the playing the Bad Apple music video in Mario 1 and the original like arbitrary code to just beat the game at all in
Hmm.
like a minute. You have to do Mario 3 and do that exploit and then swap the cart to Mario 1, correct?
Yes, yes. And that's like theoretically in the Mario 3 test that I'm doing before that, it's all happening in like the blink of an eye. But it could just be a regular standard run. You could go to World 7 level 1 and then write some code to try and set this up yourself, but it would just be way, way slower than just
Hmm.
using Mario 3 to do that in like half a second.
And when it comes to like swapping carts in the middle of a speed run, it gets a little, does this count? There's like a gray
Right, it
area
was
there.
definitely, yeah, it was a gray area, especially when I actually submitted this to test videos. It was certainly a gray area.
Hmm.
But specifically with this run, what we're doing is, yeah, we're in World N because when you kill Bowser with fireballs, he gets replaced with a different object for every world you're in.
Hmm.
Like if you're in World 1, it's a Goomba. I think World 2 is a Koopa. But if you go beyond World 8, he still becomes things, but it's just parsing this table out of bounds. So it's entirely unrelated bytes of code being interpreted as like, ah, yes, we're going to replace Bowser with object C9. And what this object does, when it's time to figure out what that does, is it's the exact same thing that's happening. There's a list of, it's like, well, with an ID of 1, we're going to run this code. With an ID of 2, we're running this code. But again, we're parsing that table out of bounds. So it's like, object C9. Well, we're going to start reading code from all the way over here. Which I think the code it runs is the same function that happens when you finish loading a level. Because you got the little screen where it's got like Mario's lives remaining and then the level begins.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, it needs to increment some variable. The game keeps track of like what the state, there's some state machine where it's like a value of 0, we're preparing the game. A value of 1 is like the title screen. 2 is for the loading screens. And then 3 is for the regular in-game scene. So if we just killed Bowser in World N, and then he became object C9, and then we ran the end of level code, and we just incremented the state machine from a value of 3, which is normal gameplay, to 4, which once again parses another table out of bounds. And then this time it jumps to open bus, which I'm not even going to try to explain here.
Yeah.
And then that jumps to a specific location in RAM that Mario 1 never writes to. So back in the Mario 3 test, I just write code at that location.
Long story short, arbitrary code execution.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
I know about the letter worlds and everything, but because, there's technically 256, this is a fairly well-known kind of exploit, especially with like, if you know the old tennis method where if you swapped carts and got a certain rally, you could like load later levels. Anyway, that's a whole other video. I think Retro Game Mechanics Explained went into kind of how that works. But
yeah,
I've been super familiar with the even like when I was a kid, I would hear about, Minus World 9 was like 6-2 but underwater and looked really cool. Like I was aware of this even back then. And it wasn't until like the Retro Game Mechanics video where I got an understanding of how it worked on like the programming side of things, like where it's getting its data from, level data and tile data, and why you're getting like underwater levels and all that kind of stuff, which is really interesting. But I never put it together. Like I would play the letter levels for fun, but I never put together killing Bowser would, spawn different enemies that don't exist.
Right.
I
And there's actually a lot of
I
worlds.
didn't think of that until you just mentioned it. Like I didn't know. And then you said it, I was like, wait a second. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that.
And there's a lot of worlds where like killing Bowser with fireballs will turn him into like a spring or a fire bar, and it's really funny.
Yeah,
He can be in all sorts of things.
I just never tried it. Wow, that's crazy. I know
I'm not the
doing
first
later,
person to
but-
try that either. I think
No, yeah.
another glitch hunter named -7 did a lot of research into this, and I think they were also looking into trying to run Ace. And I think the best candidate was like World Hex FC, I want to say, because it jumps to like address 300 in RAM, which is almost barely able to be controlled by you. I did a lot of work trying to meaningfully run something from that location, but I wasn't able to get anything to work. And then I just started playing through every single world of the game, and I wanted to write down 1, does Bowser appear? 2, if he does a fire flower appear up before this point? And then if I do defeat Bowser, what does he become? Does the game crash? Can I use this? And I documented like every single world. And at the time, I wasn't actually familiar with how Open Bus works. I knew that killing Bowser in World End jumped to Open Bus. I wrote that down in my notes as something to circle back to. I didn't immediately recognize that would be able to jump to some location that I could store a payload in. Until after I went through the entire list. And then at that point, it's like, well, I guess I should learn how Open Bus works.
Got it. And yeah, I certainly don't understand what Open Bus is. The buses I know are frame rules, so you can only have so much information. So I won't even try to have that be explained. But okay, to go back to like the running the arbitrary code in N2, are you writing the payload in Mario 3, or is Mario 3 just being used to get to World N?
So in Mario 3, I'm setting it up to go to World N, and the other thing I'm doing is the code that I write that will get executed does the following. Basically, I read the controller and a few times. The first 2 is to write down a location, and then the next one is a length. And then I will then read the controller n times. So it's like I'll start. Let's say I want 15 bytes and I want them at address 300. So I'd set that up to write at address 300. I'd set it up to write 15, and then I would read the controller 15 more times, and then just every time I read the controller, it stores that value at that address.
Hmm.
And what that lets me do is I can, from then, write basically anything anywhere, which allows me to overwrite the entirety of RAM to become a video player, which I then feed in all the graphics and audio data with.
Hmm. So, for dumb man's terms, myself, you're are you writing the code in Mario 3 then? Like the payload.
Initially, the code is in Mario 3. Like, the code written in Mario 3 lets me write more code.
Okay.
And then once I'm
But you
actually
are
executing that,
writing a majority of it in Mario 1 at the like
yes, the
defeat Bowser
majority is
part.
in Mario 1.
Okay, that
The moment Bowser's defeated, yes.
got it. Okay. That makes more sense. Um yeah, I wasn't exactly sure how that worked. But now I'm going to go on a quick tangent because I'm curious, and this is something I've heard talked about for years, but you know the FDS version.
Yes.
Um it is different with how it loads things.
Hmm.
I don't know the
Yeah,
comp.
there's different letter worlds.
But
Like the minus
basically,
world is different.
yes, the minus world is world 36. And I know that works because in a warp zone, like it says the first one is 432, the number above it tells the game to take you to that world. But in world 5,
Hmm.
there's actually, if pipes were there, they would work, but they're not. So they have a blank tile to
Right.
like have it not show up, which is
Yeah.
also the equivalent of the number 36. But if
Yeah,
there
it's
is a
tile
pipe there,
36.
36. That's how that works. Anyway, so NES minus world just is a looping 7-2, what we all know. Minus world takes you to completely different stuff. But in minus or 36-1, -1 in FDS, there's a Bowser. And you can get
Right.
fire before Bowser.
I actually don't know what happens if you defeat him that way.
But there
Um,
was a theory like, what if
right.
you
I
could use this?
actually I wonder. I think someone looked into it and I don't know what they found.
Hmm.
But I do know, yeah, you can defeat Bowser in that world. I think it does crash the game actually. I don't know if it's able to be manipulated.
Hmm. Well, I there's your next project, I get no, but
Yeah, yeah, something else to do. Yeah.
but that's just something I've heard been theorized for a while, and I don't know if there were any updates on it. So I figured if anyone would know, it's you, but I
No,
guess not.
sorry about that.
That's fine. Maybe, but who knows? Maybe. Like I'm. That's very much like an RTA, like
Yeah, getting
available
a fire
slot.
flower there is pretty easy. Yeah.
I don't know what you could do with the crash, but and already like technically beating -3 as far as the game's concerned, you're beating the game. Like that's already
Mhm.
technically any percent. we
Right.
just we would never actually call it that.
Oh, speaking of crashing the game, I know World 9 Level 1 on the NES version, the game can crash a lot there. I primarily, before I started looking into the other glitch worlds, I started with World 9. I was not able to get anything meaningful to happen with like the glitchy values that can be used to summon objects with.
Mm.
I think there was some. I was kind of able to manipulate it at one point where it's like, haha, I can spawn any object of my choice, except like the way levels or objects are generated in Mario 1 is very specific, and it also does a bunch of like bitwise math on certain numbers, so the highest value I think would be like hex 20. So,
Hmm.
and there was nothing in the first hex 20 that actually allowed me to run arbitrary code. Some of them did just crash the game though.
Hmm. You see, I remember like just swimming around 9-1 for
Hmm.
whenever I would just for fun. Like, there's the whole like they call it like W256 hack where you can level select any of them.
Right.
And it would always crash at the same point, but I know if I would like slow down randomly, it wouldn't crash
Yeah,
and I could
it
beat nine
wouldn't.
one.
Yeah.
I assume that's like a sprite like despawning whatever's getting loaded that crashes or whatever.
It was a while ago, so I forget the specifics, but I think it had to do with like the coordinates of the bubbles you make because Mario's underwater, so he's breathing bubbles, and
Oh.
then like the coordinates of those bubbles is what the game is using as like the pointer into the game's code to figure out where to spawn enemies from, which is really confusing. It's like
Oh.
different x coordinates of the bubbles would lead to different enemies being loaded in. And
Okay.
then at one point I was like, haha, I know this value corresponds to Bowser, so I could actually put Bowser in World 9. I couldn't make a Fireflower before then, though.
Wow. Well, that answers a mystery I've had, I guess, of how that works. Not that that helps me in any meaningful way, but
Right, right.
the more you know, I guess. Wow. Yeah, there's so much about the letter worlds I just don't understand. I
Yeah.
it was just like
There's a lot that I need to read up on as well.
it was just like, all these just it's this level, but maybe a different layout or just the same level. But then
Hmm.
you get like, T-1, which is like clouds everywhere and like playable for a while, and you're like, what?
Yeah,
What is
yeah.
happening? This is
I know
crazy.
there's one area where there's like 36 worlds in a row where it's the same exact level. I think it's like 8 dash. It's not 8-2 or 8-1. I forget the actual level, but it's the same level over and over and over and over again before it
Hmm.
eventually reaches some stage that crashes the game.
Hmm. Just interesting, interesting stuff. And you found a way to abuse it, which, people have
Yeah.
known about all these extra worlds for a while now, at least if you're in the know. And this was like the first time it could be arbitrary code executed, I guess,
Yeah,
which,
in a
was thought
meaningful way.
impossible. Yeah, which was thought impossible in Mario 1 for the longest time.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a pretty big deal. And of course, you
Pretty
used
big
it
deal.
for very important things, like,
It was such as playing Bad Apple.
of course, as you.
There's actually been a lot of other people submitting Bad Apple tests to test videos in the past week.
Mm,
There's one of Pokemon Yellow, and I think one of Pokemon Silver,
starting a trend, are we?
I guess.
But the first one was just, not crashing
Yeah, the first one
using
I
the
did was just
Bowser
avoid
crash.
crashing the game.
Just
I also set it up so you're no longer in World End. It actually puts you in 8-4.
oh, that's right. I
Uh,
forgot it switches to 8-4, which because doesn't it usually not load Peach, or no, it does.
it's still Peach, but she just says that she's in another
Yeah,
castle.
that's what it was. Like it only says your quest is over in World 8-4, I assume.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
actually, I don't know if you have to be in 8-4. You just need to be on World 8.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, yeah. That explains why in Minus World, well, nothing shows up at the end of -3 on FDS version, but yeah, it says, uh, which is interesting because it always says Peach is in another castle or whatever, but you can still hold B and go back
You
to tile
still
screen and
unlock
unlock. Yeah.
the hard mode. Yeah,
Like the game
New
still
Game
treats it
Plus.
as GG, congratulations, you did it. But
Hmm.
which is just all sorts of fascinating, but again, very complicated and outside my area of expertise. I understand it on a basic level.
Right.
So, but yeah, I forgot you like changed the level to be 8-4, so it actually says the proper message and acts like a general any percent completion,
Hmm.
which is scary.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I forget if people were actually trying to do that because in theory you could actually set that up and then swap carts to Mario 1 and then beat the game that way. I forget if someone was actually trying to. They made like a custom cartridge that just sets up the RAM for you, and then you swap to the Mario 1 to do the world and victory.
I will say, if we ever got an ace exploit that could be RTA viable, different category. We're not
Oh,
dealing with this
absolutely,
We're not dealing
absolutely.
with this madness. But the fact that one day Ace
Right.
and
It
Mario
could be
won,
possible.
like in theory, it's like kind of scary because we just
Yeah.
assumed it impossible for so long. Ugh. But yeah, that's just a maybe. But
There is
currently,
actually a lot of interesting ways to crash the game. I know one
mhm.
of the more popular ones, there's a task like fastest crash where you just overload the graphics buffer and then it puts garbage tiles on the HUD and then since the sprite zero hit no longer occurs, the game is just stuck in an infinite loop.
And people can do that RTA. Like,
Yeah, I've done it RTA.
oh, well, there you go. Well, I've done the one you do in 1-2.
Yes, that's the one that I did
Okay,
RTA.
Yes, I was able to do that in 46 seconds, which the test is 46 seconds, just like point 0.7 faster
Nice.
or something. So, you know,
I
good.
wasn't timing it when I did it. It was not fast.
You can do it in 1-1 now, though. The RTA speedrun for crashing is like 18 seconds now.
That's crazy.
Because there's like some very complex way you can do it in 1-1, and it is art. You can do it RTA. So,
Very cool.
yes. I'm sure nothing really can be
Yeah, I don't
used.
think that can be used to run arbitrary code. It just crashes the game.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's another interesting crash where in two-player mode, if Mario 1 dies in like a water level and then Luigi dies while climbing a vine, then it goes back to Mario and the vine appears and then it corrupts the enemies in the water level.
Mm. Yes, I
I know
do
that
remember the
can be
Vine
used.
thing.
Yeah, that can be used to crash the game, but that's also not. I don't believe that can be manipulated.
But the Bowser killing has so far been like the only useful in terms
Yeah,
of
that's the
like,
only known way to execute code right now, or
wow,
arbitrary code.
which is still a huge find.
Yeah, yeah.
Because yeah, all the crashes have just crashed the game, but this is one it's like, yep, now we can do stuff with it. Here here's some videos,
And
I
yeah, actually,
guess.
before I made the Bad Apple one, I made another one that was just me playing around with like I had a funny idea. I made the Traveling Salesman, the game,
Mm-hmm.
and I made Mario run around just by editing the graphics and fooling around with the sprite data just to make it look like it's its own playable game.
Mm-hmm. But in
That
theory, you
was
can. This is Ace. You can do anything you
Yeah,
want, right?
you can do anything. This is complete 100% total control, so long as you also set up the payload in Mario 3.
Mm, well, I I'm excited to see what people could come up with because I mean we all, or at least most people, have seen the old Mario 3 stuff they've done at GDQs where it's like actually playable stuff, and
Yeah, they added their own power-ups and stuff.
yeah, so
I hope that can be done with Mario 1. It'll be a bit trickier because the only method of waiting for a frame, because with the Mario 1, the Mario 3 task, and I'm going to be a bit technical here,
okay.
cut me off if this makes zero sense. But typically the way you wait for the next frame for like the internal logic is you wait for something called a non-maskable interrupt. And I believe for that task they are actually able to hijack the non-maskable interrupt routine. But for the Mario 1 task, I was not able to do that. I had to use a secondary method of waiting for the next frame, which is just reading from a specific address on the picture processing unit. And that specific address is also not perfect. There's a slim chance where if you read that at the same moment a new frame begins, it doesn't detect that and you just lose an entire frame.
So is like, long story short, that like writing the arbitrary code in Mario 1 is a lot slower than Mario 3.
It would be a lot harder to make a stable game in RAM of Mario 1 than it would be for Mario 3.
Okay.
Because you might just get a whole bunch of frames dropping entirely because the only way to actually wait for a new frame, you'd have to rely on that one picture processing unit register that could have false negatives.
Hmm. Okay. I'm trying.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, well, I mean, it's not your fault. The
Imagine
programming
if the
hard.
only way to make a playable game also had the risk of every frame there's like a 10% chance of lag.
Yeah, that would not be ideal, I guess. All right. So obviously that's a whole thing that you can do anything with, and we've kind of hit, I think, everything about at least Mario 1 arbitrary code execution.
Right.
Like that's where it stands right now. Who knows what people could
As of
actually
right
do with
now,
it?
yeah.
There's limitations that are in play, but you know, it was thought impossible. Now it is. And I guess that leads into, because we haven't gone into detail yet. So far, this has all been done with just like pushing buttons at speeds like incomprehensible.
Hmm.
But then we get into like this whole new method, which I don't know if anyone really thought up until you did it, at least to this level.
I'm pretty sure I'm the first one to try this.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we can explain what that is.
Right.
The most recent
So
development.
And I actually came up with this idea back in 2021, right? I made my Mario 3 TASes, and then someone was asking me, could it be possible to beat Mario 3 even faster? And I did a bunch of brainstorming. It's like, well, I mean, maybe you might be able to run custom code if you just swap the cartridge out with a different cartridge every CPU cycle. And I had that idea in the back of my mind for a couple of years, but I didn't actually take it seriously until last year. After I made the Bad Apple task, I was like, I think now's a good time to try beating Mario 3 by swapping cartridges every CPU cycle.
Hmm.
So I started making my own emulator to do that. And a lot of people have asked why I didn't just modify an existing emulator. Like, why go through the trouble of making my own? And the only reason I did that is because I wanted to learn more about how the NES works. I just wanted to
Mm,
make my own emulator. So that's why I did that. Uh,
yeah.
but but with the idea of swapping cartridges between CPU cycles, I had no idea if this was actually feasible or not. And more specifically, if we are limiting this to existing officially licensed NES cartridges, how fast could you beat these games? Which I just thought was a really fun optimization problem.
Mm-hmm. Because technically, if you could just swap the code every CPU cycle, there's no limitation there, in
Exactly.
theory, which is
In
just
theory,
boring.
right?
Let's do it with actual like physical real things that exist.
I would absolutely love to try doing this on actual hardware, but I'm mostly a software guy. I have not worked with like making my own circuit boards or I've never done any of that.
Yeah,
That's a bit out of my wheel.
I'll dive into that topic later because I'm curious about a couple things, but to try to better understand this, so this is the theory of every time, or a CPU cycle, I guess. I guess describe a CPU cycle to me, a dumbass.
Yeah. So the way that the code works is every instruction is broken down into CPU cycles. For instance, the simplest load instruction. Let's say there's a bunch of registers or just numbers stored on the CPU. You got like if you want to do math, you're going to be working with what is called the A register or the accumulator. And if you want to just set the accumulator to a specific value, you would run the LDA instruction or load A. So let's say we want to load A with the value 0, you'd run LDA number 0.
Hmm.
And that ends up being two cycles. The first cycle is what instruction are we running? And then it will read from the ROM of the cartridge, wherever the program counter is. It says, we're getting this very specific value, which corresponds to a load instruction. And then the next CPU cycle is what value do we want to load? So then it once again reads from the cartridge to figure out that value, and then the internal logic of the CPU just sets that number into the register, and it all works out.
Hmm.
And then for like a more complicated instruction, like to store somewhere, you need to know where you want to store it. So first, you read the opcode. Okay, well, this is a store instruction. You read the two operands to get the 16-bit location of where you want to store this number, and then the fourth cycle is actually what writes to RAM.
Hmm. And how
So,
many of these are happening in like a frame?
there's approximately like 28. I want to say 28,000 a frame. I forget the
Holy
exact number.
crap.
Yeah, it is very consistent though. It is the same amount every frame.
And there's already like, approximately 60 frames a second.
Yeah, every second. Yeah,
So you're
uh,
multiplying that by 60 for a full second of CPU cycle.
there's hundreds of thousands of CPU cycles every second. Yeah.
The reason I wanted like to compare it to like a timing, because obviously we can only time in frames because that's what's
Hmm.
visually apparent.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
for like, and I think I showed you this because I was curious, but Flibbity Dibbity's tech for like the Mario 1 races all on the same screen, he's like
Right.
tapping into the consoles and all the hardware and everything and
Hmm.
pulling the data live. So when two people finish on the same frame, you can the game, as far as CPU cycles go, it's still like can determine which one beat in CPU
Yeah,
cycle
you could
station.
figure out exactly which frame finished execution before the other one.
So apparently I won a warpless race by 5 CPU cycles.
which is absolutely crazy. That could have been literally anything.
which which is like real, right? Like I'm not making that
Yeah,
up. I showed you
yeah,
the
that's
video.
that's real. I mean, like maybe the game calculated your score for that frame ever so slightly faster than the other person you were racing,
Which
or maybe it just didn't need to run some specific calculation because maybe you were holding a different button.
so obviously, again, timing is done to the frame. So it was a tie to the frame. No one's arguing that. But in theory, am I
Just
did I
validating
win that race by like 0.00001 or something?
I, if we're going by like the moment of last input, it was probably exactly a tie. But if the
Yeah.
game did run through the code faster, and if you want
In
to
terms of
call that
CPU
a
cycles.
victory,
I mean, you're
it-
timing your tasks by, or the one we're now talking about, by CPU cycles to get like the accurate
right.
frame.
I, I
Now
I
tasks
stopped.
end their timing on last input, so that's where
Yeah,
that.
task is usually on timing on either the frame of last input, or if you're doing like a subframe task, it's usually the actual CPU cycle when the last input was read.
Okay.
Uh, I think a while ago, I could be wrong, don't quote me on this, but I think there was like a Pokemon Red task that was doing arbitrary code, and it saved time in like CPU cycles,
Hmm.
but like the same frame count. I could be wrong though. That was years ago when I heard that.
So I won that race by like 5 microseconds or something.
Yeah,
Cool.
I think it
I
would have been like two and a half, maybe 3 microseconds if it's only like 4 cycles.
I think it was 5. So the way his tech works, and I don't know what exactly the value is. I assume it's CPU cycles since power on, because it's a
Hmm.
very large number. I don't know if it was in the millions, but it's this is a warpless race, so it's like 19 minutes. In fact, it was exactly like 19 minutes 3 seconds and like point 0.7.
Hmm.
And there's like we can get it down to the hundredth of a second because that's the only value that matters at that point,
Right.
in terms of frames. But yeah, my number was 5 digits shorter. So
That's crazy.
assuming that is CPU cycles, it was 5. But I don't know if that was exactly what the value was. I'm assuming it
Uh,
was.
oof. Run that by me again. You said it was like the second followed by three uh
No,
digits.
it was just a number.
Okay,
Like, and the number I think was like in the millions.
it was probably CPU cycles then.
Okay, then cool. Yeah, okay.
I don't know. If we're talking millions for like a 5 second run, or not second, minute.
Well, again, 19 minute. This was
Right,
warpless.
right. Oh, warpless. Okay. Ooh, and then actually, I mean, if we're talking like counting CPU cycles for a 20-minute run, it would probably be higher than just millions. I could be wrong though. I'd
Okay.
have to do some math.
You know what? It maybe I even talked to Flippity about this. I don't remember if when I had him on my show if this was after that. It might have been, but um I should ask him exactly what that value is because I might just be spreading misinformation. But I know the reason I'm thinking about this is I know in the commentary Bismuth specifically said that I won by 5 CPU cycles. I don't know if he was joking or not, but that's what I'm going
Hmm.
off of here. That
You said it was about 20 minutes?
yeah.
It would be about 35 million CPU cycles.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the value was. It might have been that high. There were a lot of digits.
Gotcha.
Um but anyway, I'll get an exact answer on that later. I was just curious because I think
Hmm.
I sent you the video just because I was curious. Like, hey,
Yeah.
you're familiar with the CPU cycles? Anyway, my tangent aside, I was just curious.
Hmm.
So yeah, this is the whole to get back into this new task and how it works. Um, so again, inner cycle cart swapping is the like official name we're giving it, right?
That's what I gave it. Yeah,
Well, I mean,
which just means swapping carts between cycles.
mhm. So that's like again, you said what it's some tens of thousands per frame.
Yeah, there's about like 29,780.5. That's the actual number. And the 0.5 is it just alternates every frame, like one just gets one extra cycle every other frame.
And we're talking
Um,
about swapping carts
so if
that
you were to
fast.
swap cartridges, yeah, that fast, because we're going between CPU cycles, yeah. But the runs are so short, like you can beat Mario 3 even from pressing the power button in just like 30 CPU cycles.
Hmm.
Um, I think the Super Mario 1 task was a bit more complicated because in order to actually win that game, there's so many different variables that need to be met.
Hmm.
And then even more if you want to actually correct the graphics.
But even
But
still,
yeah,
you're beating it before the human eye can process anything.
exactly,
So it
yeah.
doesn't really matter.
And what's extra funny is for like the Mario one that doesn't fix the graphics, even that takes like 6 scan lines. Like the CRT would have drawn like 6 scan lines in that time, except standard NTSC televisions omit the top 8 scan lines. It's something called overscan, so it wouldn't have even if it could be rendering in that time, it wouldn't show up.
Hmm. So yeah, just before anything has happened, and then I guess in terms of scan lines, how fast was Mario 3 in its fastest form beaten?
In its fastest form, it's like I think it was like 27 pixels. So we're talking about 10% of a scan line.
And how many pixels are in a standard?
A standard scan line, like the visible portion, there's 256.
And then you
Um,
multiply that by what, like 240 or something?
yeah, except there's
Yeah.
also something called horizontal blank, which
Mm,
is the parts between scan lines.
yeah.
I forget the exact number. I should know this because I made a NES emulator that needed to know this, but I forget.
All the complicated work's done. That
Yeah,
information can go away now, right? No. but
yeah, right.
but yeah, so just okay, a good example actually is I'm sure you saw the slow-mo guys video where it
Yes,
was Mario
yes.
1 and they were showing like they
Yeah,
had
you
it.
could see the scan line move.
So we're talking like the game was beaten in like the slowest motion they had
Yeah.
about that about that one frame of their thing where it was like, just a
Hmm.
handful of pixels in a
Yeah,
scan
you
line.
could.
You beat Mario
Yes.
3.
In about one of those frames. Yeah.
So it's funny, you can use that slow-mo guys video as almost like a visual representation of the time it took.
Right.
Because it is a visual. Now it's like absurd amounts of slow-mo, but
Hmm.
it is still a visual, which is kind of interesting. Because they got that so slow, like it would actually take, like, I think in their slowest motion they had, like it would still take like, you know, maybe a second of 60 frames per second video to do like the Mario 1 in its slowest
Hmm.
one because of just how slow it was.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the faster Mario One task was like 400 microseconds. I think it was like about 800 CPU cycles. And then yeah, the slower Mario one that also corrects the graphics was about it's escaping me. It was like it was about 2 frames,
Okay.
less than 2 frames.
Hmm. Okay, but so obviously a frame is the entire picture was drawn a
Yes,
single
yes.
time. That's how a frame
And
works.
like when you power on the console, the upper left of the screen will immediately start to be like that's what the picture processing unit is starting to process it like at that exact. That's where the CRT beam would be at the upper left.
Okay.
So for like the 6 scan line run, that's just how far the beam goes before I stop swapping cartridges.
Hmm. Now, but if we're is the first frame like even have anything that's visual?
No, and
So
this is also
either no matter what, there's nothing
yeah, no matter
there.
what. And even more specifically, like the picture processing unit, it has something called the reset flag, where for the entire first screen and the entirety of the first vertical blank, it will not allow you to enable rendering.
Mm,
It is forcefully set to not allow rendering. So
incredible.
you actually just cannot draw anything on screen within the first frame.
And then what the Mario one with the correct graphics was 2 full frames, right?
I think it's about 1.2 frames. I get
Okay.
like
Well,
maybe a fifth or a quarter of the way through the second frame, but I actually had to wait for basically the entire first frame so that I could start writing to the graphics again because of the reset flag.
is anything drawn to the screen during that time?
The first frame, no. And the second frame is rendering is disabled because you
Okay.
can't actually write to the background while rendering is enabled, or else things go horribly wrong.
Yeah. So in all of these tasks, nothing happens at all.
Yeah, nothing gets drawn. Yeah.
It just gets to the point is does, and I know you like brought it up, but does like how fast this was beaten even matter, because all of them are visually identical. It just the
Right.
game is done immediately. Nothing is drawn that would indicate anything else.
A lot of people are comparing it to the angry video game nerds beat a game button.
I mean, yeah, that's all it is. That's it's just absurd how fast this is being done.
It's really insane. Yeah.
Like I'm trying to explain it in terms of, what can be visually represented, but even that is impossible because
Let
nothing is
me
being
look at the
visually
exact.
represented.
Someone did some math on one of the comments on my video. Let me load that real quick. Yeah, the video length to speedrun length ratio for that task, and then the video I made that explains it is 480 million.
Hmm.
So you could run the task 480 million times in the time it takes to watch the video that explains it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, but yeah, obviously I won't get into all the nitty-gritty details. There's a whole video about that out now. So, watch that if you want to know more, because I'm not that's way too complicated to explain here, but yeah. I'm just trying to get the
Especially
general
without
gist of it.
visuals.
Yeah. I'm just trying to get the general gist of it.
Yeah, the
Talk.
general idea is the console wants to read data from the cartridge, and then you can just choose which cartridge it reads from at any given moment in order to write your own custom code. And
And
then at that point, you just find whatever code beats the game the fastest.
and you were the first person to really take this idea and run with it. I don't know if anyone else has ever had the idea to do it,
Correct.
but like, and it makes sense because when it comes to like card swapping, it's already a gray area of like, does this count in terms of like a game completion
Right.
in
Like
an official
with my
capacity? And
my
now you're
Mario One task
swapping
is
tens or hundreds or thousands
yeah.
of cards. It's like,
Yeah, I
well,
mean my Mario one that fixes the graphics has like 700, maybe not 700, but it's at least 400 different cartridges being used for that one run.
or it's like, well,
Can you really call it a run of Mario 1? Like,
yeah, it was a run of a lot of games. It takes a lot of work to get there. But yeah, and again, you have in theory, if you had this perfect cart, anything could just be done instantly. So
yeah,
it's
you could
like,
just
does it?
create your own custom cartridge that just immediately wins whatever game you want.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, it's a cool idea, but and as a task, like, tasks, they can do anything. So it's like,
Hmm. And that's also why I decided to limit it to like so I'm not using custom cartridges. I'm only using the
yeah.
existing Nintendo ones.
But like in any like sort of official capacity, I agree with the argument that it doesn't really count as like a game completion. It's just a cool,
Yeah,
this is
it's a
possible,
cool. Yeah,
and the explanation behind how it's possible is fascinating.
right.
But
I'm definitely not like saying I have the record. No, this
no,
is
no,
just
I'm not. No one's claiming that.
exactly. Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's just fascinating. And then, yeah, as a task project, and I now I said I'd get into this, and I kind of do. Obviously, you wouldn't know how to set this up, but do you think it theoretically be possible to like console verify this method?
I was actually talking a lot with the people in the Task Videos Discord before and slightly after I released the video. Just like because at the end of the video, I have my own little proposal for how this could work,
Mm-hmm.
where I have like a custom cartridge with a bunch of 72 pin connectors on it, where you would put other cartridges.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, from what I recall, they were saying it's not impossible. And I have absolutely no idea how difficult it would be to make, but they said it was not impossible. Like it could be done.
Interesting. Okay. So when they say like connect the cartridges, do you mean like cartridge like lock on, put another cartridge on it, put another cartridge on it, have it
Yeah, so,
tout?
so like a single circuit board with like 5 different cartridges connected, and then you would have some electrical way of choosing which cartridge gets read at which moment in time.
So for the for the Mario one with correct graphics, you need a tower of like 700
They,
cartridges.
yeah, they actually did the math. It's like if you were to use all of these cartridges end to end, it would be longer than an Olympic swimming pool.
Man, GDQ in a few years is gonna be awesome for task block. Oh my gosh,
Like
imagine.
10 different people carrying this giant line of cartridges on their shoulders.
All to beat Mario 1 faster than you can even process. Fantastic. Tassing
Thank you.
is an incredible world of bullshit.
It's such a fun one though.
No, yeah, no. I mean, it's a fascinating world, and again, it's so different from RTA,
Yeah.
where we could never do this. But the fact that it's possible in any way is just fascinating.
Yeah, I that is probably one of my favorite parts about tassing is it's like I mean I'm actually not very great at Super Mario Brothers like RTA. I'm kind of bad at it, but like through the power of TAS, I don't need to be good. It's now an optimization problem. It's a puzzle game now.
And it's just a completely different mindset to
Yeah,
for kind of the same outcome, the same goal, just in
the goal is
very,
to beat the game
very
fast, but
different ways.
but instead of doing it through skill, it's now a puzzle game.
Well, there's still skill involved, just very different
True, true. It's a
skill.
very different set of skills. You're right.
Yes, instead of pushing the buttons, you're telling something to push very complicated sets of buttons
Hmm.
and apparently do a bunch of other crazy stuff like swapping carts tens of
Yeah.
thousands of times per frame.
I don't know if anyone else is making card swapping tests though.
Yeah,
This is kind of some shenanigans that I've been pioneering, I guess.
I mean, it works, and the fact that it works at all is wild.
Yeah.
And uh, I guess we've kind of touched on it, and you did have like not exactly a call to action at the end of the video, but more of like this is what is theoretically possible. Do with this information
Right.
as you please. Like, is
Exactly.
where do you see this leading?
I don't know. If it can be done on actual hardware, I think it would be really cool if someone actually does it. With the conversation I was having in the Task Videos Discord, I don't know if it was a joke or not, but someone was saying like, yeah, if we get this done before April Fool's Day, we could also submit it in the GDQ uh, submissions.
Mm-hmm. I'd
I don't
be
know if that's
interested in
gonna
seeing
happen.
that.
I would be very interested, but I don't have the technical know-how to build such a device.
Yeah, that'd be someone who's able to do that's job, I guess.
Yeah.
But
But I mean, I would absolutely love seeing other people making this kind of stuff, and then like even with like the subframe tasks, because other people have made subframe tasks and submitted them to task videos. I absolutely love reading the author comments and just seeing how other people do this with other games.
mhm. And like you said in the video, this makes any NES game have arbitrary code execution,
Yes.
essentially.
I wanted to showcase more games, but I did have a bit of a deadline for myself to get the video out. But
Hmm.
I would have loved to showcase, yeah, you can do this with like Kirby's Adventure or The Legend of Zelda or Final Fantasy. And I know Task Videos kind of has a meme of making tasks of Color a Dinosaur, and I
Hmm.
thought it would have been really fun to make my own ending screen for Color a Dinosaur, in which I am awarded a PhD in dinosaur coloring.
We see you reveal too much information. This is a perfect idea. Now you've just
And
said
now
it
it's
out
already been
loud.
announced. Oh,
Ah, man, well, that you have an April Fool's idea now. You better take that
I
and run with it while you still can.
got a few weeks.
Hmm. But wow, because I don't know. Part of it is also like well, first of all, this is like such a convoluted way, and it's kind of like, I guess it's kind of fair to say it's kind of a cheat code. Like,
Oh yeah. Like I'm
technically,
not
the game doesn't matter anymore. You're just
exactly.
really just writing
I'm
your own
just running
code
code on the
immediately.
mouse. Yeah.
You're just doing it inside of any game you essentially want by using any other game you want. But so I kind of like being able to find the arbitrary code exploits, in the game itself,
Yeah, yeah.
which it's its own
And that was a
thing.
lot of fun looking into Super Mario Brothers. And when I actually realized, oh wow, I can use this to run code, that was a lot. That was very exciting.
Hmm. So yeah, this whole intercycle card swapping, it's just got to be its own cool thing that
Yeah,
exists now.
I now that the video's out, I'm probably not going to be making more intercycle cartridge swapping runs.
Yeah,
It was the gimmick of the video, you know.
yeah.
It's something that I'm not really taking too seriously myself.
Well, it, like you said, like it's just cool that it exists and that you can
Yeah,
explain how it works, and
exactly.
that's all you really need it for. Like,
Hmm.
because at the end of the day, you can just load up any game and just do whatever you're just writing code in a game at that point immediately. Like, there's nothing
Yeah,
else really to it. It's just a very complicated way of doing it, but what it boils down to is that's all it is, and you don't want that to become like the norm or anything. That kind of defeats the point
right.
of everything. It's just
I want to be the norm, but the fact that it can be done is
is
what I want to document.
fascinating.
And
Yes. And
yeah,
mission success, I feel. So,
thank you.
but my next job for you specifically is I want, like, you've already done it, like the arbitrary code exploit in Mario 1, but to make something showcase some like crazy GDQ showcase out of it, like they did for
Right,
Mario
I
3.
would love to do that.
So, yeah, do that
Yeah,
for
being
me.
able to, I've never actually been to a GDQ, but yeah, I would love to submit like one of my tasks is in a task block, and it would be really cool to just be there for it.
Yes, because the Mario 3 arbitrary code execution where they had like Mitch play stuff and they
Yeah,
had the whole
that
color a
was so
dinosaur
cool.
joke. Yeah, to this day that blows my mind. And they did that with like Pokemon and Brain Age and all that other cool stuff.
Yeah,
But Mario 1 was never possible. Now it is. So
hmm
I want to see it there, and then you need to invite me to like play whatever you screw up for me.
If I can do that, I will do that.
Yes, this is very important. I need this in my life. Anyway, it'd just be very funny. And again, like for years, I just assumed we all assumed it was impossible in that game, and still technically is from just
Right,
booting it
it's
up.
definitely yeah.
Now the
It
goal is
requires
to
a cartridge swap.
yeah. Now the goal is to somehow get it without a cartridge swap, which still looks impossible. But I don't know if the
There's
-1 FPS
there's more
exploit.
research to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe.
I still need to figure out how the FDS works at all.
Yeah, that's I already don't understand how anything works, let alone the FDS. So I'm not even gonna pretend I know what I'm talking about. But
Gotcha.
I just know there's a Bowser in a world
Yeah,
that is above 8, and you can kill it with fire. What if?
that might be all you need. Yeah, that might be all you need.
Well, I get. Did we kind of go over everything about the newest like
I think so. Yeah.
topic? Obviously, I'm
That,
not
that
going to go into any super in-depth detail. I just wanted to touch on the
right,
basic
right.
points and kind of give visuals on just how absurd it is.
I
Obviously,
think
people
we
can just watch the video for the full explanations.
yeah, I think we covered all that pretty well.
Okay, well, that kind of just leads to kind of we've covered everything then, right?
There are a few runs that I've made that I didn't submit to task videos, but I did upload them to like my user account.
Mm.
For instance, I have a subframe test of Kirby's Adventure that also beats the game in like 2 seconds. And then one of The Legend of Zelda, that one takes like 45 seconds. And the way that one works is very technical. I don't know if I could do that justice. Um, but it was
Another
a very
video
fun one to
idea.
make. Yeah, yeah.
You're a YouTuber now. You can
I
use all of this
am.
for
That
content.
you're right. Um, Other things that I've done. I don't know if you want to talk about the game I made.
Oh, you can talk about whatever. I mean,
That some people, not many people, but some people have submitted speedruns of that game at least. If we want to keep it relevant to speedrunning.
okay, well now it officially counts, so now it's fine.
Cool. I genuinely, it was really interesting seeing people speedrun the demo of my game and finding like weird glitches and some shortcuts through a section that I was not expecting.
Yeah, what's your game
Um,
called? You didn't even say the title.
oh, you're right. It's called Fantastic Fist. It's actually currently on sale for 80% off. I
That's
did not
dope.
plan this. But yeah, it is. It's called Fantastic Fist. It is a keyboard and mouse platforming game where you use the mouse to punch things and interact with the environment, while the keyboard is used to move the main character. Um, yeah, the speedruns of that game have. I mean, they're not popping off, but the ones that people have made, I love watching them.
I have 100% of that game.
Yeah.
I can recommend it. well, so yeah, we didn't even cover that. At, you've done all of this behind the scenes stuff, but you're also just like a consistent game developer, at least for like jams and stuff, like the
Yeah, the
more shorter
Ludum
projects,
Dare.
Ludum Dare, etc. And
Yeah,
then you
I've
literally have
actually.
a game, so
Yes, yes.
like you do a lot of work, and now you're a YouTuber and like
Yeah,
artist, or I should mention, um, I know for your game, what all of that was you,
yes.
programming, art, music, etc. And then
Correct.
that ties into YouTube as well, or obviously
Yeah,
art,
I'm just using
music.
the music from my game.
Well, the art's new.
The art is new. You're right. Yeah.
Hell, you made art
And
that I'm just using as on my
yeah, yeah.
stream.
And my
Just
art style has actually changed a lot, even between releasing the game and now.
mhm.
Because when a lot of the art that I've drawn in my earlier Jam games, I specifically made like a 32 by 32 image, and I filled as much of that as possible with the character. So a lot of my characters are short and wide.
Hmm.
And that also kind of applies to Fantastic Fist because the character fits in a 16 by 16 pixel square.
Hmm.
But yeah, I've definitely started making characters look a bit more human.
So how do you do all this?
All of it, or just like the art?
No, I just meant how do you just have the time to do all of these different things?
Well, right now I'm unemployed. But
Oh no,
that'd do it.
that'll do it.
But I mean, I've definitely over the past like I've been actually Ludum Dare happens in a few weeks, and this will mark 10 years of doing this game jam. Um,
So you've been
I have.
programming longer than destroying video games.
Oh yes, yes.
Fair enough.
I actually got started programming back in maybe like 2011 or 2012. I was making mods for Minecraft and another game called Blockland.
That
Yeah,
just sounds like
uh,
Minecraft.
it is kind of. I'm pretty sure Blockland came out first, and it's not a survival crafting. It's more just a sandbox.
Mm.
But yeah, I got started by making mods for video games, and then eventually it's like I just want to make a video game, and then my friend Noah introduced me to the Ludum Dare Game Jam.
Mm. And just doing it ever since then, huh?
Yeah, I have not missed a single Ludum Dare.
How many of them have you done then?
I think this will be like my 26th.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
They used to be 3 times a year, and then they dropped down to 2 times a year.
Well, that's good for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But so out of curiosity, does your like programming and game design background, do you think that's helped with your like now tassing stuff?
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. I know with like specifically with like the game design programming, it's usually I get an idea and I need to figure out how do I turn this into reality? How do I actually program this? And with like the specifically game jams, I'm under a very tight deadline. So it's like I have a fun idea. Do I even have time to program this? And a lot of the times I have to start cutting corners and getting desperate and somehow make the game still work in a very short
Like,
amount of time.
like a true programmer.
Like a true programmer, yeah. And then when I don't have a deadline, I can just be like, okay, let's actually figure out how would I correctly program this without cutting corners and getting sloppy. And for like and that definitely helped a lot with like one, I kind of vaguely understand how games work, and then as I'm learning assembly code, you start learning how NES games actually handle all of their code, which is very different from how say Unity handles everything. Like object-oriented
Mhm.
programming is entirely different than making a game that runs on the NES.
I assume assembly is like just incredibly basic and like
Yes,
harder
it's
to like understand because it's so basic. Like it's probably
yeah,
not as user friendly. I don't know if that's even a
it's
thing,
very much
but
not as user-friendly.
yeah. But you know what I'm trying to say.
If you want to use any specific functions, you'd have to write those functions yourself.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, with how I've got a lot of experience programming for video games, and then I learned how Mario 3 works. I've read through that disassembly countless times when I was doing my glitch hunting for that game, and I definitely think that contributes to when it comes to breaking video games. I have a good idea of what's going on under the hood and what can be exploited.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I just know again they're so different, like modern game development and NES development, that
Hmm.
I don't know how much easier it makes it, but
Probably not that much easier, but it's at least a start.
you at least have a general understanding.
Yeah.
So I guess that's fair. But well, I guess that's kind of everything then, huh?
That is pretty much everything, yeah.
The whole history. Um, I guess one of the last questions I have then is just what are your plans in, I don't know, tasking development, video, just whatever you do, because you
Like, what
do
do
a
I got
lot.
coming up next?
Yeah.
So as for tassing, I'm not entirely sure. I had a really funny idea. This isn't entirely tassing, but back when I made the Bad Apple Tass, I was using its PCM audio, specifically not DPCM audio. And I just recently thought, well, what if I did try to use DPCM audio? How horrible of an idea would it be to try and compress audio using the ROM of Super Mario Brothers? I don't know if I'm gonna make that video, but it does sound like a fun project. As for specifically tassing, I'm not sure what I'll do next. I do have an idea for a game that I want to make, although right now it's just text and a TXT file of ideas.
Mm.
Um, I'm gonna try and not use the Unity game engine. I want to try and make my own, which I know is a terrible idea. Making your own engine takes a lot of time and it's a lot of work. But
Well, you've already made your own emulator, so
yeah, exactly, right. For a little bit, I was thinking about making a game that runs on the NES.
mm,
But I'll save that for a future project.
mm. So basically just a lot of ideas, but you I know
Yeah,
you've kind of exhausted all your heavy hitters at the moment.
correct. Yeah, this was the one that I've been teasing for all of my other big YouTube videos. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, I could beat it in 5 microseconds, and now that video's out. So I'm not entirely sure what videos I'm gonna be making next.
but as I've said, you're a YouTuber now, so it's got to be something.
It's got
There's
to be
there's no
something,
escape now. You're sucked
right?
in.
People are expecting content.
Yep. Yep. Now you have to deal with being a game developer, a tasser, and a YouTuber. Good luck.
Yeah. Thanks.
As well as an artist, a musician. My gosh,
I do it all.
get a lot. No. Uh, well,
That's what the 100th coin does. It gives you the one up.
mm, oh well. All right. You showed me. It all makes sense now.
It came full circle.
There we go. Well, I think I'm out of direct questions. It sounds like we covered everything for the most
Yeah,
part. That's important. Thank
I'm
you.
not sure where I'd go from here.
Yeah, that's fair. So I guess let's see. I thought there was one more thing, but it slipped my mind. I'll at least say you can use, or here. So you have the YouTube,
Hmm.
and I know you used to do RTA, and I thought while you were talking about that, you mentioned something about streaming once.
I did a few Twitch streams, although I really did not Like I'm probably not going to be streaming on Twitch anytime soon.
Fair enough. I just forgot to like ask more about that because I know you have a Twitch channel, but it didn't look active. And when you mentioned
Actually, it is
streaming, I
really
was like,
funny. What I used to do back when I started glitch hunting is I was just looking for funny exploits. I found one that allows you to reload Mario 3's title screen without clearing RAM, and then you can immediately beat the game from World 1 Level 1. And
oh,
I specifically did that as a joke and submitted it just to add to the rules not to do this.
oh, okay.
So if you look at
You're
like
one of
the any
those people.
I'm one
Great.
of those people. Yeah, if you look at the any percent rules of Mario 3, there's something that's like don't do RAM storage, and there's like no documentation on what that means.
Oh, that
It's
was
just
just your fault.
that
Okay.
was just my fault. Yeah.
Well, at least we have a confession, I guess. But okay. But I was just gonna say I knew you had a Twitch, so I linked it. But I was like, I don't know if you use it. But
I back when I did that, I was using Twitch just to do that on console. But I'm not joking. It took me like 3 tries to beat World 1 Level 1 as fast as possible without dying after I set everything up.
oh, fair enough.
It's like I set it up and then I died. It's like, well, let's reset. I can do it faster. And then
Fair
like the third time I overreact. It's like I did it. Any percent is dead.
enough. Perfect. All right. Well, I'll let you self promote your stuff that are active. But
Yeah. So YouTube. That's primarily where I produce content. I technically have a Twitter, but I kind of stopped using it because I just used Blue Sky for the first time.
based.
Um, yeah, and I know my game's on Steam. It is technically on sale for 80% off for I want to say until Thursday, for the Steam Spring Sale.
There's still time.
There's still time. That's pretty much all I'm doing right now.
I'll, I always use the shout out command. I don't know if you'll ever
Ah,
use your Twitch, but it's the only thing I can shout out on Twitch, so I'm gonna do it anyway.
sounds good.
Close enough. Well,
Yeah,
uh,
thank you for having me. By the way, this was a lot of fun.
yes, no problem.
I, I've never done a podcast interview style thing before. This was new for me.
Well, as a famous YouTuber now, you better get used to it. I'm glad I was able to get here first. Take that, everyone else. No, but but yeah, I know this was also kind of last minute, so thank you for that.
Of course, of course.
Original plans fell through, so glad we got our episode. The streak lives on.
There you go.
We love to see it. And yeah, I guess that is everything. Just last minute anything we didn't touch on that you can think of.
I can't think of anything.
Perfect. Then I did my job correctly, and
I
you yapped
I
accordingly.
encourage others to beat video games in dumb ways and then make videos about them.
True. You know, a lot of people have been doing that, and it seems to be quite successful. So it is a genuine. There's a genuine market out there, apparently. So expect more in the future, I suppose. And yeah, I guess we'll call it a day.
All right.
Yep. Thanks for watching, everyone. Continue to check out episodes, Twitch and YouTube. Appreciate it. And we will leave it there. All right.
I'll
Goodbye,
see you around.
everybody. Bye.